Hi, in this video I am going to elaborate on the models of language knowledge, foreign language knowledge more specifically, and the models of language acquisition. So as for the models of language knowledge, first of all we have to point out that Bachman and Palmer laid out a model back in '96. Their model consists of organizational knowledge and pragmatic knowledge as the two constituting parts of language knowledge. Within organizational knowledge, they distinguished between grammatical knowledge and textual knowledge. And within pragmatic knowledge, they distinguished between functional knowledge and social linguistic knowledge. According to them, grammatical knowledge, remember, being part of organizational knowledge, is inclusive of vocabulary, syntax, and phonology, whereas textual knowledge is inclusive of cohesion, rhetorical and conversational organization, and imaginative functions. As for functional knowledge, remember, being part of pragmatic knowledge, consists of ideational functions, manipulative functions, and heuristic functions, whereas social linguistic knowledge, also being part of pragmatic knowledge, consists of dialects and language varieties, registers, natural and idiomatic expressions. The other model of language knowledge that I want to point out here is proposed by Celso-Murcia, Dernier, and Tharrell. They designed an interactive model of language knowledge, and they determined 4 composing parts. First of all, they say that there is a linguistic competence which is in interaction with discursive competence. Discursive competence being in the middle of the circle, so being in the hub of all the interactions. Then beside linguistic competence, there is the actional competence and also the social cultural competence. And this model, the interaction, the dynamic interactions amongst these competences are determined by strategic competence, according to the authors. Then we also have to point out that McIntyre and Gardner proposed another model of language knowledge. According to them, the socio-cultural milieu determines to a great extent the language knowledge. And as they asserted, there are 4 different dimensions inherent in language knowledge. The first dimension is antecedent factors that are biological and experimental. The second one is individual differences and variables. The third one is language acquisition context. And the fourth one is outcomes. Individual differences and variables are the following, according to them: intelligence, language aptitude, strategies, language attitudes, motivation, and language anxiety, being in close interaction with each other. As for the context, it can be formal or informal, and the outcome can be linguistic or non-linguistic. Having elaborated on and having presented the three models of language knowledge, let's take a look at models of language acquisition, amongst which I am going to list four. The first one is the behavioral theory, dating back to the 1940s. The behavioral perspective states that language is a set of verbal behaviors learned through operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is a method of changing behavior so that the desired behavior is reinforced immediately after it occurs. And B.F. Skinner is considered to be the father of modern behavioral theory. The theory centers around the idea that children are conditioned by their environment and the reinforcement of their communication. Two concepts, imitation and practice, are important for understanding the behaviorist ideas of speech and language knowledge. And language development. The young child will try to imitate sounds and words they hear their parents say the best they can. When a child says a word that sounds close to what the parents say, they accept and reinforce it. In other words, they begin shaping the word until the child can eventually say the word as well as the parents do. The second theory is nativistic theory. The nativistic theory is a biologically based theory which states that language is innate, psychologically determined, and genetically transmitted. The most renowned representatives of this theory is Noam Chomsky and the Chomskyan linguist Steven Pinker, who wrote the book The Language Instinct. Having said that language is innate, this means that a newborn baby is pre-wired for language acquisition, and the linguistic mechanism is activated by exposure to language. This theory believes that language is universal and unique to only humans, and that unless there are severe mental or physical limitations or severe isolation or deprivation, humans will acquire language. The nativistic theory argues that caregivers don't teach children the understanding of language and don't usually provide feedback about the correctness of their utterances, as opposed to what behavioral theorists used to believe. A very important concept within this nativistic theory is the language acquisition device. Noam Chomsky came up with the idea of the language acquisition device, LAD. The LAD is the language organ that is hardwired into our brains at birth. At birth. Once a child is exposed to language, the LAD activates and language acquisition takes place. The third theory that I want to mention here is the semantic cognitive theory, which is a perspective of language development that emphasizes the interrelationship between language learning and cognition, that is, the meanings conveyed by a child's productions. Children demonstrate certain cognitive abilities as a corresponding language behavior emerges, according to Bloom and Leahy back in 1978. The semantic meaning that the person wants to communicate determines the words and word order, which is the syntactic form the person uses. For example, children know what they want to communicate, that is cognition, but don't always use the correct semantics or grammar. The fourth and last theory that I am elaborating on today is the social pragmatic theory of language acquisition, which considers communication as the basic function of language. This perspective is first seen in infant-caregiver interactions, in which the caregiver responds to the infant's production of language. sounds and gestures. The prerequisites for the social pragmatic theory are the following. The infant must have a caregiver in close proximity. The caregiver must provide the infant with basic physical needs. The infant must develop an attachment to the caregiver. And the infant and caregiver must be able to attend to the same objects or actions simultaneously. And 5, the infant and caregiver engage in turn-taking in both verbal and non-verbal behaviors. In McLaughlin's publication back in 2006, this theory is well propounded. So in this short video, I have tried to summarize the most important models of language knowledge and those of language acquisition. Thank you for listening.